My name is Ken Evans, and I entered the Marine Corps from Houston, Texas in 1957. I left Houston at about midnight, right on the crack of New Year's. But it was to show you how naive you can be after having 4 years of college and all, two fraternities and all that good stuff. I had no idea what was going to happen in Quantico. We got there and it started unloading off the train, and my foot hadn't hit the concrete until this great big old tall sergeant. He was bellowing, and I thought, hell, I'm gonna be an officer. He's not talking to me. Well, he was talking to me, and and before the water got hot, I found myself in the back of a 6x with no cover on it. Just a little with about a dozen or so other guys, and we were there kind of like deer in the headlights. We're all in shock. Well, we got around. They marched around, and we were standing there in a big bunch of rows, of course, and we were reporting into that one room at the end of the building. And this kid with the long hair and the trench coat was in front of me, and this other sergeant had told us what the deal was. You were supposed to walk up to this door and bang the thing 3 times and say, "Sir, candidate Umpty-Ump, reporting as ordered." And you're standing there with your suitcase and stuff doing it. Well, Hankin was in front of me, and as you look through the door, there was a desk there, an old government desk, and another great big old sergeant sitting there. And Hankin went in. He went up and knocked on the thing and said, the old spiel. And this was Sergeant Wackerly, and Sergeant Wackerly said, "Get in here." And so he kind of rambled in, and he said, "Drop your luggage." And so Hankin leaned over and said his thing. He said, "Oh, no." I said, "Drop your luggage." So he had him doing drop the luggage drill for it seemed like forever. And I'm standing out there where I can see and hear all this, getting up. Well, I'd been in the Marine Corps Reserve for 1.5 years, and so I had a little idea about. By then, I'd focused in. I'd realized, hey, this ain't like going to the reserves in college. This is the real. So I reported in, and long story short, we that first day, it seemed like we got our uniforms, we got our haircut, we got I don't know what all done, and at night, the lights go out at 10 o'clock, but we'd learned how to make up a rack, we'd learned how to stow our gear, we'd learned all about, the big trash can, galvanized trash can in the thing was spit shined. And it was a big garbage can, but nothing ever went in it. You couldn't put anything in it. And I still can't recall what we did with the garbage, but nothing went anywhere. Everything was meticulous. And we finally got we exhausted and frightened and didn't know what the hell. And we're in a squad bay where there's about, 60, I don't know how many people, maybe 50, 60. We're in double racks, and it's the rack is really a blanket and a sheet and a pillow. Maybe it's 2 blankets, I don't know. But we collapsed, and I was asleep before the lights went out. As soon as I was just about to, gone for good, all hell broke loose. This big diesel train came roaring through there going about 100 and a big swooping light on the thing was coming right in that squad bay. I mean, it's like on the, well, everybody was up wondering, what in the world is that? Well, that was, we learned that that was a train. It came that time every night. And then later in the middle of the night, 2 or 3 more trains came. Well, after about the second train, it didn't make any dang difference. We could sleep until you could hear this silent light switch flick at 5 o'clock when they turned the light on. And then we hit the deck and the day started. But it was discipline, and what they were really teaching, what I got out of it all was they're teaching me that when your legs said no and your mind said go, your legs would move. And in other words, they could run your fanny to the ground, and that's what the intent was. They'd take us out and run us up and down hills and in the mud and cold and slush and stuff, and everything you had on was just a muddy mess. And when we'd get through doing whatever the exercise, and it was all geared so that they started off, of course, slow, I guess, but the first day, damn near killed us, and it seemed like every day it was programmed so it was just enough to almost exhaust you. And then when we'd come back into and hit the grinder, before we'd cross the tracks and go to the building and clean up and all that stuff, they'd run us around the grinder until, we'd lose maybe 5 or 10 guys would fall down, just couldn't collapse. But the attrition was pretty high. The people who started OCS and those that finished, there was a pretty good batch of them that didn't make it. And then, of course, that lasted for 12 or 13 weeks, a lot longer than it is now. And then when we finally graduated there, they made us second lieutenants, and then off I go to the Camp Upshur for seemed like 8 months. We got out of OCS on the 23rd of March, and we got out of basic school in November, about Thanksgiving. And in the meantime, when I was recruited in Houston, the old recruiting guy said, I told him I wanted to go be an aviator. And I wanted to be an aviator at that time because it paid more. And being a poor boy, and growing up, I was thinking, hell, if I'm going to be a Marine, and I wanted to be a Marine, I might as well be an aviator if I can. But the day I was supposed to go to Dallas to have a flight physical, we were having a whatever you call it, SEC or something was making an inspection of our records. Anyway, I passed that flight physical, and I was tickled spitless, man. I thought, boy, I haven't got it wired. Then they after that, they sent me down to the air base there at Quantico one day, and I got to take an orientation flight in a T-34, which was our first little training plane they would put us in when we went to Pensacola. Long story short, I got a little flight in a T-34, and when we graduated from basic school, about there may have been a dozen of us got orders to flight school in Pensacola. Got down there, and that was an 18-month program. All of it except about the last 6 or 7, 8 weeks was fixed wing and multi-engine training. We got an instrument card, we got qualified aboard a carrier, and the last portion of it was at Ellison Field flying helicopters. And we flew little Bells, and the main training plane then was an HRS. And the guy that gave me my last check at Ellison Field was a fellow named Bill Cunningham. He was a young captain. And Bill Cunningham happened to be in 364 when I checked in out there in 1963. And he was, he'd been an instructor Ed Foster had been an instructor. Grant Ewell had been an instructor. I had been an instructor. Bill Crane had been an instructor. And so one of the things that happened to our squadron, we were supposed to go on an overseas tour, 13 months, and the ideal thing was supposed to be you go to Okinawa and you stay there for maybe a month, and then you go to Vietnam and you stay there 4 months, and then you get out of Vietnam and you go to the Philippines and stay there 4 months, and then you get out of there and you get on the aircraft carrier and you fiddle around going from place to place, and then you go back to Okinawa, so that you end up, you were supposed to have 4 months in Okinawa, 4 months in the Philippines, and 4 months in Vietnam. And as it turned out, we got to Okinawa in December, I believe, and it was late, and we stayed there about a month, maybe longer, I don't know, and we got all ready to go into country, and we got all biffied up and all the gear and get on a C-130s. We were going to be flown into country, and we were going to relieve a squadron that was on site then, take over their helicopters. They want to come get on board the 130, come back to Okinawa and take the helicopters we'd been flying there, and it was supposed to do like that. Well, we got on the flight going to Da Nang, and we got all the way, I think we were in Vietnamese airspace, and got turned away. And what had happened, it was one of the Vietnamese had a coup taking place, and they closed the country down, so you couldn't fly in or out at that time. So we turned around and flew back to the Philippines, and we were there maybe 2 days while they sorted out the diplomatic stuff, and then we loaded back up and went on to Da Nang. When we got there, it seems to me like it was on a Saturday. Maybe it was early Sunday. I guess it was early Sunday. We the setup there was really something. They had these old French Foreign Legion barracks, and the squadron that we were relieving, the officers had the rooms, and they had a hot locker so your clothes wouldn't turn all moldy and green, and they had a bunk they'd have procured them from somebody, but they weren't Army issue or Marine issue, and skeeter nets and all that stuff. Well, we had to buy the hot locker and all that stuff from the guy we were relieving, and he had a little map book, and it had the map book all chopped up so you could stick it in your flight suit and go back. Well, that Sunday morning we each went out with one of the aircraft commanders from the old squadron, and we had a flight that lasted about an hour and 15, 20 minutes, and they took us up and pointed out all the major valleys and gorges and crap to get us oriented on this map. And that afternoon, at lunchtime, we took over the operations of the squadron, and I had the first, medevac standby. And it was, I was as naive as a 6-year-old kid almost about what was going to happen. I'd never heard a gun shot out of a helicopter. We didn't have time for all that. They wouldn't let us put machine guns in them at the time. And so about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the whistle blew, and they launched, I guess there were maybe 3 of us H-34s and 2 Hueys and an OE, little observation plane, on a deal. A bunch of special forces guys were out there with a bunch of Vietnamese troops, and they'd gotten in a gaggle and gotten the stuff stomped out of them, and we had to go up there, and the weather was not worth a hoot. When you got north of Da Nang, the weather was often one kind in Da Nang, and when you got north of the little mountain range, it was totally different. We flew up to about to Hue Phu Bai, maybe not that far, and we hooked a left, flew out towards Cambodia, and we were following a river, and before we got to where we were going, the weather had gotten down so that we were actually down here flying between these things and weaving our way back. So we were restricted by the terrain, and we got up there, no problem. When we got to where we were supposed to pick these people up, you could smell the cordite from where they'd had the gun battle and stuff. And all of a sudden, there's a field about the size of a football field in the middle of the jungle, and it looked like little stick men all over the field. And they'd had a hell of a battle. I mean, there were dead people everywhere. And we went around, and I don't know, we ended up landing in a string like this. And they started loading these little dead Vietnamese soldiers. They'd wrapped them up in poncho halves, and it looked like little cigars with their head and the feet sticking out, but dead as a doorknob. And so they loaded about 9 or 10 of them in the belly of my aircraft, a couple of pigs that were in crates, and they were evacuating all these people that were holding them back from moving out. And the three of us loaded up and took off and headed back down the thing. And we hadn't gone very far, and we came to a place where the terrain made a little hook here, and all hell broke loose about the time we were coming around the corner. And we had briefed before we left, that if we came under fire, the crew chief had to, was to return fire, tell me, and then go ahead and open up on them. And I remember that when they started, we had mounted jury-rigged mounts for M60s in the doorway, and the crew chief was shooting out of the door. When that machine gun started going, I never heard one before, and if I'd have been strapped in, I'd have probably hit the ceiling. And I looked out, and I could see the tracers going back and forth, and the little Hueys around there shooting rockets and stuff, and we just kept trucking. And one of the Hueys that was supporting us got around it, busted an oil line. So the weather was so, he had to land on we went on past where these guys were shooting at us, went on down and landed on a sandbar, and drilled around till he got fixed up, and went on and took these bodies and stuff to Hue Phu Bai, dropped them off, and drove on back to Da Nang. And I never will shall forget, when we got there, we landed and taxied into the fuel pits, and by that time it's just the end of the day was coming on, and I remember climbing down the side of that H-34 and looking in the cargo hatch there, and there's blood and guts in there about 1 inch thick, and to myself I said, well, you smart ass, welcome to World War III, because I had no idea it was going to be, I knew about people shooting at us, but I didn't know it was going to happen on the first go of the first day. And anyway, so we started growing up, but we had a lot of interesting, the ones of us who had been instructors instructed the pilots that we were going to turn our squadron equipment and everything over to a Vietnamese squadron. And the plan, the big long-range plan at that time, supposedly, was that we were going to turn all this crap over to the Vietnamese, and we were going to be the last squadron in Vietnam. Well, we were there 4 or 5 months, and you notice as we were flying around that they were doing all this construction work on the aprons of the airport, big holes, 30, 40 feet deep, and they were pouring concrete and rebar, is looked like an inch or two thick, and all these spooks, civilians that we never saw. And turns out, of course, they were planning for the buildup of troops and stuff. But we had three or four pretty good gaggles. We had a couple of, one of them I remember is a Dozah operation, and it was a big all squadron effort. I guess we had 22 of the 24 aircraft up, and it was only the first day of that operation was the only time I ever flew co-pilot while I was in Vietnam, and it was, I've never been so uncomfortable in my life, because it was, I flew with Goody Warren, and we were the lead plane of the second 12 aircraft, and the skipper, Colonel Lavoie, was leading the front bunch. And that's where we first, right off the get-go, we're flying out there, and the Vietnamese Air Force was supporting us with ADs and great big old planes that could fly with their own weight in ordnance, and they were in there coming down and dropping bombs and all this crap. And just before we were to come in, one of them peeled off and smoking and went right across the hill and boing into the deck. And we got reorganized real quickly and went ahead and the first 12 went in there and landed, and we orbited back here at a safe altitude, we thought. And when they got in there, one of the planes, I think we may have lost 2 planes or 3 planes on that jump, but they had one of them down in the zone, and we had to have the maintenance plane come in and pick the people up out of that and get them out of the way. And when the second 12 came in there, it's the same thing. It was just, they were shooting all over the place, and of course, by the time we got in, we're coming in, there were good guys on the ground that you couldn't tell I couldn't tell a good one from a bad one, and it's just very eye-opening. Another mission that stands out in my mind is they had one where they, for some reason, it was an all-captains flight, and first plane on the ground was, the zone was hacked out of a mountainside, and it was room for one plane. And the first plane in dropped off a Loadmaster, Thompson, dropped off, and in the process of that, Cunningham caught around here in his leg and went in his hip, and he fell over, and he couldn't move anything, and they didn't know, and it all happens all of a sudden. And finally, I think his co-pilot figured out what was happening. Bill got off the controls, and they were able to get him out and take him to a place so he could get some first aid. But we went ahead and picked up, I don't know how many people, and almost every plane got hit. We lost another one. Bill Crane was flying a bird, and his co-pilot was a Vietnamese, and he got hit as he had picked him up and we'd briefed to turn right, because it's easier. You lost less power turning right than you did turning left. So I was I guess I was leading. I was in the last 4 or 5 or 6 planes, and everybody was getting the crap knocked out of them, and so I decided when we take off, we're gonna turn left, and we didn't get a single bullet hole in the airplane, and everybody after that turned left, and we quit taking a lot of damage. But it was another real eye-opening thing that happened. And of course, there's lots of stories about the aircraft carrier, and we ended up spending, I don't know, we were at sea on the Valley Forge one time for 58 days without making port. It was the first time most of the sailors on the Valley Forge had ever been at sea that long. And we went to the Philippines, and we thought, oh man, we're going to get to stay here at Cuby Point and play golf and see all the sights and all that crap. And we were there, I think it was 3 days, and all of a sudden one afternoon they'd announced that we were going to have to get back aboard the ship because there was a typhoon coming. And well, what the typhoon ended up being was the Tonkin Gulf crisis. And so we loaded up back aboard the carrier and steamed off, and all of us were thinking we were getting out of a typhoon. And first thing you know, we're laying off of Hanoi out there in case, they didn't know what the hell was going to happen. But we ended up at sea a long time, no mail for a long time, and I guess in that part of the trip, I must have hovered over or landed on everything the Navy has. I mean, and banged poor old chaplains up against gun mounts, and those guys were the bravest people in the world, them and corpsmen. It was fun being aboard the carrier, and we, it was hard on the troops, and because it was the boredom and stuff that are long periods of time when we couldn't do anything because we were steaming. We'd ran through a tail end of a typhoon, and that big old aircraft carrier was going. I remember standing on the forecastle where the flight deck is. There was on the Valley Forge, there was a space here below the flight deck that was like a little front porch, and it was, of course, his officers' country only. So you could go up there, and if a guy had snitched a bottle of booze aboard, you'd go up there and drink, and I remember doing that and throwing the empty over the side with a flight schedule rolled up, and on the back of it somebody had written, "Help, we're being held captives against our will," and laughed our ass off doing that. But it was. I remember standing up there, though, in that front of that ship going down until the water was almost coming over, and then back up was like exhilarating, like riding a roller coaster times 10. But when you're young, I had my 30th birthday in Da Nang, and that day I remember it because this is one of those days where I just really was. I came that close to getting plugged, and I remember going back that night to the officers' club and buying drinks for everybody, and the next day we got up and flew all day long again. But it was a great time. My job there in the squadron, I was the training officer, which meant when I was at basic school, I learned all this stuff about close order drill and stuff. Well, most flight officers don't go to basic school, and so I stuck out like a thumb, and everywhere I went, they said, we'll put him out there because he can supervise that and teach them the new stuff and all that jazz. Well, I spent a lot of time doing that, but it was all I remember is the good stuff. I never remember being afraid. I remember being Goody and I talking that day. I said, man, we were smoking cigarettes as fast as you could fire them up, and he'd fly it a little bit, and I'd fly it a little bit, and I said, Goody? No, I said, Major Warren, Major Warren, I think I'm about as afraid as I could be. He said, oh, hell, Tex. He said, you can't be as afraid as I am. I outrank you. And we laughed, but it really was. It was very exhilarating, and the whole experience at 364 was I guess was probably the highlight of my Marine Corps career.